Path of Exile 2 releases just in a few days here, and it is due time for everyone to start choosing their classes. So first up here we'll go over the Sorceress, as that is one of the 6 classes releasing during early access. I'll go over the entire overview, the skills, the Ascendancies. We'll deep dive into what that can look like for the specialization system, as well as even good starter weapons, and a whole bunch more. What's up world, it's Utopia back in with another video. Today we're checking out all things Path of Exile 2. Okay, so let's jump into the Sorceress class. We'll get into the entire overview there, what we're going to be looking like for build stuff and the starting weapons. Of course, as a starter, the Sorceress is a class that's built fundamentally around elemental damage, and it is one of the main spellcasters alongside the Witch. It is also, of course, an int-based class or intelligence. And from what we know so far, it's going to start near the top of the passive skill tree. And if you didn't know already, the skill trees are all linked together, so all 6 classes will use the same 1500 passive skill tree. However, they will be located in different sections of that skill tree. This one in particular is known for starting at the very top. It will have very easy access to things like elemental damage, spell damage, energy shield, and cast speed. Now, the main weapon type for Sorceress is currently the staff. However, we might potentially expect other weapon types, including wands. For right now, the Witch in particular was showcased using a wand and the scepter. However, with that, there's insanely good starter weapons. Now, if you played Path of Exile 1, originally all weapons were able to do a basic attack. However, the basic attacks were basically never used. However, we are getting a substantial change there where caster weapons like wands and staffs, those will now come with a free to cast spell. That spell will cost 0 mana and will replace the basic auto attack for these weapons. So we do have an example here, the Scholar's Ashen Staff of Sparks. That's going to grant a level 10 fireball skill, which will allow you to cast that completely for free. We can also see some additional attributes here like the 52% increased spell damage and a +1 level to all lightning spell skill gems. So a pretty cool mechanic there and slightly different than the original Path of Exile as well as Diablo 4 and Diablo itself. So if you ever do find yourself out of mana, there's no need to walk around and get monster downs to fill your mana regen pots. You can use this free cast. Now with that, there is some additional starter weapons. We had this one showcased off by Subtractum. I'll link to his YouTube channel down below where he does showcase some footage using this staff. It is called the Gilded Staff. Now this grants a skill for a level 2 freezing shard, although it does require 9 intelligence to use. But you should be able to use this quite early on, at least he does signify that. And this thing absolutely decimates bosses, so a nice early weapon there for Sorceress. And once you identify this weapon, it does grant a 47% increase to cold damage and a +2 level for all cold spells. He gets this from the very first boss after deploying on the beach. We'll have to see for sure if this is an item unique to that boss, but it does seem like you'll get this early on and it is very strong. Now of course it wouldn't be a Sorc video without the new dual specialization. So with Path of Exile 1, characters would often focus on just a single type of damage like fire, ice, lightning, or chaos. However, with Path of Exile 2, they can utilize weapon swapping for 2 different specializations. And through the skill gem screen, you'll be able to set each skill to either weapon, allowing you to swap weapons seamlessly when you use different skills. However, this does cause a small delay when switching weapons, so you may want to set some skills to both weapons if there is no difference. But this will allow you to have different sets there if you have a lightning weapon that does more lightning damage and a cold damage weapon. Then for your more big hitting abilities, you can swap between the 2 seamlessly. That's going to cause for some uniquely dynamic gameplay, which you can maximize your damage through the use of those 2 passive skill tree setups. Of course, because we're on the topic of skill trees and our passives there, the Sorceress does have a certain amount of skill gems. Now they have the most amount of abilities out of any class so far, or at least they are tied with a few with 25 active skills. Now of course they do have a broad range of skills and elements to work with, which does include fire, ice/cold, and or lightning. Now they have some other unique properties there that we'll get into a bit when we talk about the Ascendancies. However, for now that is their baseline abilities that they have designated for this class. And some synergies that you could set up there with different skills include things like Ice Nova and Frost Bomb for AoE and resistance debuffs. You could even apply Comet for high damage, cold attacks with the repositioning effect, or even use something like Mana Tempest, which powers up spells for amplified damage. So they do have some debuffs and buffs there for themselves. Now including our skill gems and what you can apply to different skill slots or gem slots, there is also something notable here called a meta gem. Now these gems have special traits that make them quite different from the regular gem. So for example, here we have one called Cast on Shock. After shocking enemies, the gem will then cast any skill gem in the supported socket. Supported sockets can be both other support gems as well as skill gem, so it can be utilized for your debuffs, your buffs, or even another skill. We have another one here called Barrier Invocation, where after taking any damage at all and losing an energy shield, you can build up charges. You can then spend all your charges to instantly cast supported skill gems, so mechanically there's a lot of auto casting with that. So with all of this combined, you can do some high damage. Sorc is also known for doing a massive amount of burst damage. They also do have some decent amount of resistances. However, Sorc is known for being quite squishy. Basically in every game in existence, they do take a significant amount of damage, and they don't have a lot of HP. But they do have something called Arctic Armor, which can help withstand that. Now this is an icy armor that builds up as you stand still, so that can help increase your durability. So while they can be a bit squishy or glass cannon, you can still help with defenses. They're kind of known across all of gaming. Now, of course, we do move on to the section here for the Ascendancies. All classes will have 3 Ascendancies. However, in the early access start, they're only going to have 2. Now, the Sorcerer's first one here is called Stormweaver. Mechanically, there isn't anything too crazy here, but it will help you a lot with damage. It has things like Tempest Caller, which grants a skill Elemental Storm that will trigger on Elemental Storm and cause critical hits with spells. You can also strike twice, and targets can be affected by 2 of your shock spells at one time, although it will cause for a 50% less shock duration, so there is a little bit negatives there with that. And then the Shaper of Storms, all damage from hits contribute to the shock chance. So a lot of lead into the lightning abilities, although Stormweaver might potentially have faster casting time and more powerful AoE effects. So this specialization, or more known as an Ascendancy or Ascension, will have quite the high damage output. However, Chronomancer is the other Ascendancy. That's going to have something very unique to that. As I mentioned earlier, Sorceress has some elementals to toy with, including fire, ice, and lightning. However, there is one more unique property here that applies to the Ascendancy, and that is the Chronomancer subclass. Now this can literally manipulate time. So you'll have things like Time Freeze, where you can immobilize enemies for more strategic control. There's also an ability called Temporal Rift, which will actually rewind the clock that will make your health, mana, and positioning return to a prior state. This ability is also shown off in a few other games, including World of Warcraft, so a really cool and unique manipulation there if you do decide to go Chronomancer. Now, as far as my plans go, more than likely I'm going to choose Sorceress and more than likely go Chronomancer, seeing as its playstyle is very unique. I will be and should be covering all the rest of the classes, Witch, Warrior, and the rest. So if you enjoyed today's video, like and subscribe, and until the next one, deuces.